Imagine a 13-year-old girl walking barefoot through the rain-soaked streets of Lagos, her torn school uniform clinging to her thin frame, clutching a crumpled piece of paper that could either save her future or destroy her last hope. Her name was Julie. How she would walk into the most expensive private school in Nigeria and do something that would leave a billionaire businessman speechless. But what happened next is beyond the imagination of the widest memory. Well, that's a story that will change how you see poverty, potential, and the power of one person's kindness forever. You see, while Julie was fighting just to survive each day, across town in a mansion worth more than most people see in a lifetime, another girl named Sandra was throwing her designer textbooks across her marble-floored bedroom, screaming at her father about how much she hated school. The irony? Sandra had everything Julie dreamed of, yet she was failing every subject. While Julie, who had never owned a proper textbook, was solving calculus problems in her head using charcoal on cardboard. 3 months earlier, Julie's world collapsed in a single afternoon. She had been living with her grandmother in a tiny one-room shack in Makoko, one of Lagos's largest slums built on stilts over a polluted lagoon. The smell of sewage mixed with burning plastic was so constant that visitors would gag, but for Julie, it was just home. Her grandmother, Mama Kemi, was the closest thing to a parent she had ever known. Julie's mother had died in childbirth, and her father, well, he disappeared the moment he heard the news. Mama Kemi worked 16-hour days selling roasted corn by the roadside, her weathered hands constantly moving, constantly working, just to afford the 20 naira it cost to send Julie to the local public school. But even 20 naira was sometimes too much. There were weeks when they survived on nothing but gari and sugar water. Weeks when Jude would go to school with an empty stomach that growled so loudly during lessons that other children would turn and stare. Yet despite everything, Julie was different. While other children her age were playing or helping their parents with menial work, Jude would sit by the flickering light of a kerosene lamp, teaching herself mathematics from discarded textbooks she found in garbage dumps. She would trace the letters and numbers, whispering equations under her breath like prayers. Her teacher, Mr. Adebayo, noticed something extraordinary about this quiet girl who always sat in the back row, wearing the same faded uniform day after day. Julie, he said one afternoon, after she had solved a problem that stumped students twice her age, your mind is a gift. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. But gifts, as Jude was about to learn, mean nothing when tragedy strikes. It happened on a Tuesday morning in October. Julie woke up as usual at 5 a.m. to fetch water from the community well before school. She called out to her grandmother, but there was only silence. Mama Kemi had passed away in her sleep, her body finally giving in to years of back-breaking work and malnutrition. At 13, Jude was completely alone in the world. What happened next would haunt Julie for months. Her grandmother's relatives, people who had never visited their tiny shack or offered to help when Mama Kemi was struggling, suddenly appeared like vultures. They fought over the few possessions the old woman had left behind, a radio, some cooking pots, and the wooden stool where she used to sit outside their home. But Jude, she was seen as nothing but a burden. She's not our responsibility, declared Uncle Tunde, Mama Kemi's nephew, as he loaded the radio into his car. We have our own children to feed. Within a week, Julie found herself living on the streets. At night, she would curl up in doorways, using newspapers as blankets. During the day, she would beg for food scraps outside restaurants, her school uniform becoming more tattered with each passing day. The other street children taught her which areas to avoid, which police officers would chase you away, and which garbage bins behind the fancy hotels sometimes contained half-eaten meals. But here's what's incredible about Julie. Even while living on the streets, even when she hadn't eaten in 2 days, she never stopped learning. She would sneak into the public library during the day, pretending to browse while actually memorizing entire pages from mathematics and science textbooks. The librarian, a kind woman named Mrs. Okafor, eventually noticed this thin girl who appeared every day, always hungry but always reading. "Why aren't you in school?" Mrs. Okafor asked one afternoon. Julie's eyes filled with tears as she explained her situation. Mrs. Okafor's heart broke, but she was a widow herself, struggling to support her own family on a librarian's salary. All she could offer was a safe place to study and occasionally, when no one was looking, a piece of bread from her lunch. For 2 months, this was Julie's routine. Sleep rough, study at the library, beg for food, repeat. Her uniform became so dirty and torn that other children would point and whisper when they saw her. Teachers at her old school assumed she had dropped out or moved away. To the world, Jude was becoming invisible. Just another casualty of urban poverty. But fate, as they say, works in mysterious ways. 20 kilometers across Lagos, in the elite neighborhood of Ikoyi, lived Sandra Adebayo. Yes, the same surname as Jude's former teacher, though they were not related. Sandra was the daughter of Chief Emmanuel Adebayo, one of Nigeria's most powerful businessmen. Chief Adebayo owned construction companies, oil wells, and real estate across West Africa. His net worth was estimated at over $2 billion, and Sandra was his only child, the apple of his eye. Sandra had everything money could buy: a closet full of designer clothes, the latest iPhone, a personal driver, private tutors, and a bedroom larger than most people's entire home. Yet Sandra was miserable. She hated school with a passion that worried her father. Despite having access to the best teachers, the finest resources, and unlimited support, Sandra was failing spectacularly. Her report cards were disasters, D's and F's in every subject except art, where she managed a C-. Her teachers described her as unmotivated, disruptive, and lacking basic academic curiosity. Chief Adebayo had tried everything, bribing Sandra with shopping trips to Dubai, threatening to take away her privileges, hiring the most expensive tutors in Lagos. Nothing worked. Sandra would sit in her tutoring sessions, airbugs in, scrolling through Instagram, while her frustrated instructors tried to explain basic algebraic concepts she should have mastered years earlier. "I don't need to study," Sandra would tell anyone who listened. "Dad is rich. I'll never have to work." This attitude infuriated Chief Adebayo, who had built his empire from nothing. He had grown up poor himself, the son of a night watchman, and had worked his way through university by doing odd jobs. He understood the value of education, the dignity of hard work, and the fragility of success. But his daughter, cushioned by wealth her entire life, couldn't grasp these concepts. The breaking point came during a parent-teacher conference in November. Sandra's principal, Mrs. Nwafor, delivered the harsh truth. "Chief Adebayo, I'm sorry to say this, but Sandra is the worst performing student in her grade. Her attitude is toxic and she's disrupting other students' learning. If she does not improve dramatically, we may have to ask her to leave the academy." Chief Adebayo felt a rage building inside him, not at the principal, but at his own failure as a father. How had he raised such an entitled, ungrateful child? That night, he made a decision that would change multiple lives forever. "Sandra, you are going to spend a day at a public school. You need to see how the other half lives." Sandra's fork clattered onto her plate. "What? Daddy, you can't be serious. Those places are disgusting." "It's happening," Chief Adebayo replied firmly. "Tomorrow morning, you are going to community secondary school in Surulere. You'll spend the entire day there, observe classes, and write me a report about what you learned. Maybe seeing how privileged you are will give you some perspective." Sandra threw a tantrum that would have impressed a toddler, but her father's mind was made up. The next morning, despite her tears and protests, Sandra found herself being driven to one of Lagos's most underfunded public schools, accompanied by her father's assistant, Mr. Johnson, who had been instructed to ensure she didn't escape. Community Secondary School was a world away from Lagos Elite Academy. The buildings were crumbling, with peeling paint and broken windows patched with cardboard. Students sat on wooden benches instead of cushioned chairs, and instead of individual tablets, they shared tattered textbooks among groups of 5 or 6. The smell of dust, sweat, and inadequate plumbing filled the air. Sandra was horrified. She had never seen poverty up close, never witnessed the daily struggles of ordinary Nigerians. Her first instinct was to call her father and beg him to take her home immediately. But something Mr. Johnson said stopped her. "Miss Sandra," he said quietly, "your father specifically asked me to tell you this. Observe everything, judge nothing, and remember that everyone here wants the same thing you have, a chance to succeed." Reluctantly, Sandra followed Mr. Johnson into a mathematics classroom where about 50 students were crammed into a space designed for 30. The teacher, a patient man in his 50s, was walking through algebraic equations on a chalkboard so old and worn that the numbers were barely visible. What struck Sandra immediately was the atmosphere in the room. Despite the overcrowding, despite the lack of resources, these students were engaged. They were hungry for knowledge in a way Sandra had never experienced. In the back corner of the classroom sat a girl about Sandra's age, wearing a school uniform so faded and torn it was barely recognizable. The girl's hair was unkempt, her shoes were falling apart, and Sandra could see that she was painfully thin. But what caught Sandra's attention wasn't the girl's poverty, it was her eyes. They were focused intensely on the teacher, following every equation, every explanation, as if her life depended on understanding every word. After her grandmother's death and weeks on the streets, Jude had managed to convince the principal at Community Secondary School to let her attend classes even though she couldn't pay the minimal fees. She had begged, literally on her knees, explaining her situation and promising to do any work necessary to earn her place. The principal, Mr. Ogundipe, had been moved by her desperation and agreed to let her attend on the condition that she cleaned the classrooms after school each day. So every morning, Julie would walk for over an hour from wherever she had slept the night before to reach the school. She would sit through classes on an empty stomach, absorbing information like a sponge, then spend her afternoons sweeping floors and washing blackboards before beginning the long walk back to find a safe place to sleep. During the mathematics lesson Sandra was observing, the teacher posed a complex problem that had stumped the entire class. Hands went up tentatively with wrong answers offered hesitantly. Then, from the back corner, came a quiet voice. "Excuse me, sir," Julie said, raising her hand. "I think the answer is x equals -7. The teacher walked through the problem on the board, and sure enough, Julie was correct. But what happened next amazed everyone in the room, including Sandra. The teacher presented an even more difficult problem, one that wasn't even in their syllabus, just to test Julie further. Without hesitation, without even using paper, Julie walked through the solution in her head and provided the correct answer. The classroom erupted in whispers of amazement. Here was a girl who looked like she hadn't eaten in days, wearing clothes that should have been thrown away months ago, solving mathematical problems that would challenge university students. Sandra felt something she had never experienced before: shame. Here she was, complaining about her life of luxury, while this girl, who had nothing, was demonstrating a level of intelligence and dedication that put Sandra's entire privileged class to shame. During the lunch break, Sandra watched as Julie sat alone under a tree, not eating because she had no food to eat, but reading a mathematics textbook she had borrowed from the library. The book was so old that pages were falling out, but Julie handled it like it was made of gold. Something stirred in Sandra's heart. For the first time in her life, she felt genuine empathy for another person. She approached Jude hesitantly, unsure of what to say. "Hi," Sandra said softly. "I'm Sandra. I saw you in the mathematics class. You're really smart." Julie looked up, surprised that this well-dressed girl was talking to her. She had noticed Sandra during the lesson. It was hard not to notice someone wearing clothes that probably cost more than most families earned in a month. "Thank you," Julie replied quietly. "I love mathematics. It makes sense when nothing else does." They talked for the rest of the lunch break. Sandra learned about Julie's life, her struggles, her dreams of becoming an engineer. Julie learned that Sandra attended the most expensive school in Lagos, but was failing every subject. "I wish I could trade places with you," Sandra said without thinking. Julie looked at her with an expression Sandra would never forget. "You don't understand," Julie said gently. "You already have everything I dream of. The only difference is that you don't want it, and I'd give anything to have it." That afternoon, Sandra sat through more classes, but she wasn't really paying attention to the lessons. She was watching Julie, observing the way this remarkable girl absorbed every piece of information like her life depended on it. Because Sandra realized it actually did. When the school day ended, Sandra followed Julie at a distance, curious about where she lived. She watched as Julie cleaned classrooms, sweeping floors and washing blackboards with a thoroughness that spoke of genuine gratitude for the opportunity to be there. Then Sandra followed as Julie began her long walk away from the school. What Sandra discovered broke her heart completely. Julie didn't walk to a home or even to a shack in the slums. She walked to a construction site where she curled up in a corner behind some cement bags, using a piece of cardboard as a blanket. This brilliant, dedicated girl was literally homeless, sleeping rough every night, yet still managing to excel academically beyond anything Sandra had ever achieved. Sandra returned to her father's car in tears. "How was your day?" Mr. Johnson asked as they drove back to Ikoyi. Sandra couldn't speak. She sat in the back of the luxury car, surrounded by leather and air conditioning, thinking about a girl sleeping on concrete. The contrast was so stark, so unfair, that it felt like a physical pain in her chest. That evening at dinner, Chief Adebayo expected to hear complaints, excuses, maybe even a newfound appreciation for Sandra's privileged life. What he got instead shocked him to his core. "Daddy," Sandra said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I met a girl today who is smarter than anyone I've ever known. She's sleeping on the streets, but she solved math problems I couldn't even understand. While I've been complaining about having too much, she's been grateful for nothing." Sandra told her father about Julie, about her intelligence, her circumstances, her determination. As she spoke, Chief Adebayo saw a side of his daughter he had never witnessed before. Genuine compassion, real empathy, and for the first time, a desire to help someone else. "What do you want to do about it?" Chief Adebayo asked carefully. "I want to help her," Sandra replied immediately. "Can we bring her here? Can we give her a chance?" Chief Adebayo was skeptical. His experience in business had taught him to be wary of sob stories, and he wondered if his daughter was being naive. But something in Sandra's voice, a sincerity he had never heard, made him pause. "Tell me more about this girl," he said. Over the next hour, Sandra described everything she had observed. Julie's mathematical abilities, her dedication despite having no resources, her dignity in the face of extreme poverty. As Sandra talked, Chief Adebayo began to see not just his daughter's new maturity, but also a potential opportunity. "All right," he said finally. "Tomorrow is Saturday. We'll go back to that school, find this girl, and see what she's really made of." Sandra could barely sleep that night. She kept thinking about Julie sleeping on concrete while she lay in her king-sized bed surrounded by pillows and blankets she had never truly appreciated. The next morning, Chief Adebayo, Sandra and Mr. Johnson drove to community secondary school. The principal, Mr. Ogundipe, was surprised to see such an expensive car at his school on a weekend, but he was even more surprised when he learned why they were there. "You want to see Julie?" he asked, clearly puzzled. Chief Adebayo explained Sandra's experience the previous day and his curiosity about this exceptional student. Mr. Ogundipe's expression grew serious. "Sir, Julie is indeed special. In 40 years of teaching, I have never encountered a student with such natural ability and determination. But her circumstances..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She has been sleeping rough since her grandmother died. I have been trying to find her proper accommodation, but resources are limited." They found Julie at the school, where she came every Saturday to study in the empty library. Even on weekends, even when the school was officially closed, she would find a way in just to access the books. When she saw Sandra approaching with a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, she felt a mixture of hope and terror. "Julie," Sandra said gently, "I'd like you to meet my father. I told him about you." Chief Adebayo studied the girl before him. Despite her obvious poverty, despite the circumstances that would have broken most adults, Julie carried herself with dignity. Her eyes were clear and intelligent, and when she spoke, her voice was respectful but not servile. "Good morning, sir," Julie said. "Sandra told me she was visiting our school. I hope she found it educational." Chief Adebayo was immediately impressed by Julie's composure and articulation. This was not a broken child begging for help, but a young woman who maintained her dignity despite having every reason to despair. "I hear you're quite good at mathematics," Chief Adebayo said. "I enjoy it, sir. Numbers don't lie, and they don't change based on circumstances. Mathematical truth is the same whether you're rich or poor." The profundity of this simple statement struck Chief Adebayo like a lightning bolt. Here was a 13-year-old girl who had discovered philosophical truths that eluded many adults. "Would you be willing to show me?" he asked. Classroom. Chief Adebayo posed increasingly difficult mathematical problems to Julie. He started with basic algebra, moved to calculus, and eventually presented problems that would challenge his own company's engineers. Julie solved every single one, often in her head, explaining her reasoning with a clarity that amazed everyone present. But what impressed Chief Adebayo most was not just Julie's intelligence, but her humility. When she didn't know something, she admitted it freely. When she made a small error, she corrected it immediately. There was no arrogance, no showing off, just pure love of learning and absolute intellectual honesty. "Julie," Chief Adebayo said finally, "what do you want to do with your life?" "I want to be an engineer, sir. I want to build things that will help people. I want to design bridges that connect communities, buildings that provide homes for families, infrastructure that improves lives. I believe that engineering is applied compassion, using knowledge to make the world better." Sandra looked at her father and saw something she had never seen before: genuine admiration. This successful businessman who dealt with CEOs and government ministers was looking at a homeless 13-year-old girl with the same respect he might show to a valued colleague. "What would you say," Chief Adebayo asked carefully, "if I offered to help you achieve that goal?" Julie's eyes widened, but she didn't immediately burst into tears of gratitude as most people might expect. Instead, she asked a question that would stay with Chief Adebayo for the rest of his life. "What would you expect in return, sir?" The question revealed so much about Jude's character. Even in desperate circumstances, she understood that help often comes with conditions, and she wanted to understand the terms clearly. She was not looking for charity, she was looking for opportunity. "I would expect you to work harder than you've ever worked before," Chief Adebayo replied. "I would expect you to excel academically, to maintain the highest ethical standards, and to never forget where you came from. Most importantly, I would expect you to help others when you're in a position to do so." "And what would you provide, sir?" "A home, education at the finest schools, and every opportunity to develop your potential. But understand this, Julie, this is not charity. This is an investment. I believe you have the potential to become someone extraordinary, and I want to see if I'm right." Julie was quiet for a long moment, processing this life-changing offer. When she finally spoke, her words would echo in Sandra's memory for years to come. "Sir, I accept your offer, but I have one condition." Chief Adebayo raised an eyebrow. A homeless girl was setting conditions. "I want to earn this opportunity every single day. I don't want to be given anything I haven't worked for. If I fail to meet your expectations, I want you to tell me honestly. And if I succeed, I want it to be because of my efforts, not because of your kindness." In that moment, Chief Adebayo knew he had found something rare, a person with both exceptional ability and unshakable integrity. The transformation began immediately. That very afternoon, Julie found herself in the back of Chief Adebayo's luxury car, heading toward a life she had only dreamed of. But instead of feeling euphoric, she felt overwhelmed by responsibility. This wasn't a fairy tale rescue, it was a test, and the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Chief Adebayo's first decision was about Jude's education. He could have easily enrolled her in Lego's Elite Academy alongside Sandra, but he was too shrewd for that. Instead, he arranged for intensive private tutoring to address the gaps in Jude's formal education while allowing her extraordinary mathematical abilities to flourish. He hired Dr. Amelia Okonkwo, one of Nigeria's most respected educators, to design a personalized curriculum for Julie. Dr. Okonkwo was initially skeptical. She had seen wealthy families try to purchase academic success before, and it rarely worked. But when she met Jude and witnessed her capabilities firsthand, her skepticism turned to excitement. "This child," Dr. Okonkwo told Chief Adebayo after their first session, "has been teaching herself at a university level. She just needs proper guidance and resources to unlock her full potential." The arrangement also had an unexpected benefit. Sandra asked to join some of Jude's tutoring sessions. "I want to learn," Sandra told her father. "Julie makes me want to be better." Dr. Okonkwo was initially concerned about combining the two girls' education. Sandra was years behind academically, while Jude was years ahead. But she soon discovered that their partnership was magical. Julie had the knowledge and study skills Sandra lacked, while Sandra had confidence and social awareness that Jude needed. More importantly, they genuinely liked each other. Sandra found in Julie the friend she had never had, someone who valued her for her potential rather than her father's wealth. Julie found in Sandra not just friendship, but a bridge to understanding the world she was entering. Their study sessions became legendary in the Adebayo household. Where Sandra had once been sullen and uncooperative, she was now eager and engaged. Where Julie had once been isolated and guarded, she began to open up and share not just her knowledge, but her dreams. The academic progress was remarkable. Within 3 months, Sandra had improved from failing grades to solid B's. Within 6 months, she was earning A's in subjects she had previously found impossible. But perhaps more importantly, she had discovered that learning could be enjoyable, that achievement was satisfying, and that intelligence was something to be proud of rather than hidden. Julie's progress was even more extraordinary. Given proper resources and guidance, her natural abilities flourished beyond anyone's expectations. She didn't just catch up to grade level, she surpassed it by years. Dr. Okonkwo began bringing in university-level textbooks because high school mathematics had become too easy. But the real transformation was deeper than academic achievement. Living in the Adebayo household, Julie experienced luxuries she had never imagined. A warm bed, regular meals, clean clothes, and most importantly, safety and stability. But she never took any of it for granted. Every morning, she would wake up early to study, then help with household tasks, not because she was required to, but because she wanted to contribute. The household staff adored her. Unlike Sandra, who had always treated them as invisible, Jude learned everyone's names, asked about their families, and helped with chores when she could. She had not forgotten what it felt like to be overlooked and dismissed. Chief Adebayo watched this transformation with growing amazement. He had expected to help an intelligent but disadvantaged child. Instead, he found that Jude was helping his entire family become better versions of themselves. Sandra's relationship with her father improved dramatically. Having a friend who appreciated education made Sandra more receptive to her father's values. She began to understand that her privileges came with responsibilities and that her father's success was the result of hard work, not luck. Even Chief Adebayo himself was changing. Jude's presence reminded him of his own humble beginnings, of the passion for learning that had driven his early success. Her gratitude and determination rekindled his own appreciation for the opportunities he had created. But the most significant change was in Sandra. Having grown up isolated by wealth and privilege, she had never had a real friend. Jude became not just a friend, but a role model. Sandra began to see that true self-worth came not from what you owned, but from what you accomplished.